Pass. Will you pass the slides? Because I have no way of.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
All right. Welcome, everybody. This meeting here specifically to talk about a little bit. It's not an extensive meeting to go over some of the modifications and things that are still there, but this is to talk about the scientific program creation and expectations. My name is Dr. Fernando Esteban Flores. I am the IADR at ASC chair for 24-25, and I am in the College of Dentistry in Oklahoma City. So go ahead and pass on, Courtney. Next one, please. I'm going to give here some space for Brian to talk about some of the uh, updates.
Uh, Thanks, Fernando. Hello, everybody. Nice to have you on the call, and it's a good opportunity, I suppose, to talk about some of the new things. I'm going to let Fernando do that, really. But before we get into some of those details, I will just update you a little bit on the IADR board task force. And what that is the last 2 or 3 years, the board has had a task force to look at the groups and network structure in general, and how this interplays in our annual session in particular. And the goal is really to keep elevating the level of science that we see in our annual session, to make the sessions more coherent by maybe putting more time and thought into how the sessions are put together, to encourage particularly the symposium organizers to get in speakers from outside IADR. I mean, we know a lot of our members are very talented and are at the forefront, the cutting edge of what they do, but we also think it's really important to hear voices from outside, from the wider scientific community. And it excites members, I think, to hear the latest and hear new perspectives from people. At the same time, we will remain as inclusive as ever. We're not talking about restricting in any way presentations at the meeting. There'll still be oral presentations and poster sessions. And another important thing that we really wanted to do was to make the poster sessions a better experience for everybody, and particularly for presenters. I think we've all been that person, and I've been that guy who's had a poster that nobody has come and talked to in 2 or 3 hours. And it can be a sort of a disappointing experience. So the board has worked with the ASC and with other parts of IADR to try and implement some changes that we hope will be improvements to your experience and the experience of everybody who attends the annual session. But the board will be open to feedback, I'm sure, and we will see how these things go. So that's all I'll say. That's the sort of spirit behind it, and maybe Fernando will fill you in on some of the details.
Thank you, Brian. All right, let's move next. So what is new for 2025 in terms of the submission process, right? So the idea here is that, as Brian was saying, we're trying to elevate the scientific level of the meeting. So we're going to have additional fields with descriptions to make sure that for symposium, specifically in other fields, we're going to be able to include information that is going to be relevant for the meeting, and specifically to highlight new research to be presented if accepted. There's going to be also an additional open text field about the diversity criteria, because historically speaking, some of the symposia would be from the same college or from males, and were not very inclusive or diverse, and would be focused in one geographical location. So the inclusion of this open field question about the diversity criteria in the speaker lineup opens up for us to be more consistent and more inclusive in that manner. And another additional question is to report about the invite of external speakers to dental, oral, and craniofacial research. So to try and recruit and capitalize on other people's experiences as they relate to the dental field. So the idea is to understand if that proposal includes a speaker outside of our field. That's a yes/no question. And then if yes, to show, information about the speaker's expertise, of course, the name and other information as relevant for this. There's going to be another, for the session proposal submission, another additional open test field question, so that we can have more clarity about why those speakers have been selected. So we are requesting to have, a 5 to 6 papers to be cited to show how this person is going to be relevant for that topic, summarize why the listing of citations will qualify that speaker as adequate in the inclusion of that listing, along with a brief by sketch to showcase, the expertise of that particular speaker in the topic area. Because historically, before, we used to have a few, justifications just be a list of citations and no information whatsoever. And so from the perspective of the ASC, it would be hard for us to understand just going through all that literature cited. So during the review, new things to come and to consider is that now we are going to have, go ahead, Courtney, you just threw me off here. So we have an update scoring model for session proposals and also for abstract. This is important because this is kind of increasing and going to, models like the NIH, where you have more layers to determine the quality, the overall quality of that session proposal or that abstract. Because in previous years, the committee felt that we were having much more scores that were favorable to the inclusion of lower quality science. So the ASC made recommendations to the board to increase that amount of scores so that we could be more granular about the quality of that abstract or session proposal. So hopefully this will be able to not only consider the strengths and the weaknesses, but we'll be able to get scores that are going to be more representative of the quality of that abstract. Now, if the abstract has a, go ahead and go to the next one, Courtney, please. So in order to be, and you see here the, sorry, go back one. Sorry, I think I just step ahead here. So you see here a score of 1 being exceptional, and then score of 9 being poor and not meeting the scientific standards for inclusion in the scientific program. Now, if the average of the scores are going to be higher than, 5, then these are going to be very good abstracts. And then if we have, at least one score that is going to be a 9, then that is going to lead to a rejection of that particular abstract. Typically, we're going to do an average of the scores and then go. We'll take questions in a little bit, Dr. Fribley. Just please don't just give me a second, okay? And so then we're going to be averaging those scores, and then we're going to be rounding to the nearest whole number. Dr. Fribley, you have a question?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I apologize that my camera's not on. My web camera is broken. I just have a question about the 9-point scale. I mean, this is an international organization, and English is my first and in fact only language. And I could not explain to you the difference between exceptional, outstanding, and excellent, because they are all used interchangeably, and I think mean exactly the same thing.
Well, I think that the criteria for the strength and weaknesses have been already provided at the website. And so I think we have to refer into those criterion specifically to determine as a reviewer what you or any other reviewer would be considering something that is outstanding, exceptional, excellent. I know that we might need to maybe wordsmith this a little bit or not, but I think that the criteria it has been already laid out. Okay, let's move forward, Courtney. Thank you for the question, Dr. Fribley. So the idea is that we will be able to, as committee members, to review the oral sessions at the abstract level via the Program View Center Scholar One. This action will allow us to increase our ability to observe and determine, topical overlaps in the schedule to try and get to what Brian was saying in terms of reducing unnecessary overlaps and trying to streamline the cohesiveness of the session as a whole of the program, and trying to make sure that the content of the program is going to be complementing that of these symposia. So that's trying to make a better experience for everybody. Go ahead to the next one, Courtney. Now, at the meeting level, what are the cool things and new things that are going on? We're trying to increase, as Brian was saying, the engagement with the presenter and presenter engagement. So we're going to be launching a poster session competition. That's a pilot program. This is going to try to ensure that students are going to be having meaningful interactions at their posters. So trying to avoid what Brian was talking about as a student to go to an international meeting and not have anybody talking to them, and that can be very discouraging. So as the task force and the board indicated, we're going to be looking at 1 to 2 groups or networks to be selected for this pilot program. Then after getting some data about, how this was perceived and see how the flow went and all of that, we will be assessing this for expansion and incorporation into future meetings. And these will also highlight any high scoring posters in our app, which is going to give people more awareness of these high level quality science and posters that are, needing some of these recognitions. You can go next, Courtney, please. Now, cool things in the making, but we cannot lose focus of the good things that are already built into the system. So procedures to keep in mind during the final decisions. In order to reject a poster or a symposium, at least we have to have one score of 9. Okay, so that means that proposal, either an abstract or a symposia, it's poor and does not meet the standard. And so this is going to then allow the GPC to process that rejection. Now, in order to be rejected, that rejection must have, along with it, constructive comments, because historically speaking, one of the issues that the ASC has always faced is that you have these rejected abstracts and or symposia proposal that do not have any comments. So then the committee has to go through all of it, read everything, and kind of judge what has already been done. So that's a waste of effort and time, and it's kind of frustrating because we can't see why the reviewers are actually rejecting those abstracts and or symposia. So these must accompany with constructive comments to be forwarded to the authors. Go ahead to the next one, Courtney, please. Now, in the past, we've seen cases where people were rejecting for incorrect placement in the scientific group or network category. So now they cannot be rejected based on those grounds. The GPCs should be able to briefly review all abstracts submitted for appropriate placement during the designated GPC transfer or recategorization period. After that, submission period closes, and then prior to the abstracts going to reviewer, that's when the timeline in which these processes are going to be taking place. Any questions so far?
Yeah, Fernando, I have a question.
Sure.
I understand an abstract can only be rejected if it's actually really, really terrible. But one of the things I hope the committee would consider is that when we see these abstracts, generally they come from students, and it really is a failure of mentorship, really not on the students, I feel. And I think that it would be very valuable if the abstracts that are scored like 7, 8, or 9 would be returned to the authors with the comments and give them 2 weeks to try to change it, try to bring it up. I mean, I think that, that is the teaching, mentoring spirit that I really wish that people would see in IADR.
Dr. Fribley, that's a great comment. And let me assure you that the committee has been discussing this for quite a long time. And I think that even though I agree with you in the regard of having more categories that leads into a refurbishment of the abstract. I think that this is a step moving to the right direction to where we're changing some things to try to get more granularity. But I agree with you. Maybe as a suggestion moving forward, the task force and the board could look into this to make a provision to have abstracts of lower quality, not those that are rejected, right? Because a
Right.
9 is a rejection, but those that are lower scores but not yet at a rejection level could be refurbished into a better abstract. Now, this could impose a different timeline for reviewers and the ASC committee, which I don't think is going to be appropriate or feasible. But as a suggestion, I think that moving forward, we can think about things moving forward. Dr. Arani, you have a question.
Yeah, I was just thinking of your last comment. So it might be better for those second round of reviews to be a late breaking abstract because logistically it's impossible to turn it around.
Yeah, I agree completely. Again, I mean, the committee has already discussed this for a long time, trying to elevate the quality of science and trying to make sure that students get the necessary mentoring by having this feedback loop. But I think that maybe a late break or something like that would be more feasible. But Dr. Fribley, your voice has been heard, and the committee is always looking to ways to improve things. Thank you. You can move forward, Courtney, please. And then other procedures to keep in mind during the session, go ahead. In terms of the creation, in terms of titles, typically we recommend the creation of a concise title describing the content of the sessions that assist the ASC to understand the potential and especially topical overlaps during our review. Also, it helps attendees at the meeting session level to find the sessions that are most relevant to them on site. And we know that IADR meetings can be quite large and sometimes difficult to navigate, especially for those who are novice attendees like students and other types of attendees that are kind of joining our group. And then in terms of the scientific group and networks, their names is also going to be appearing associated with the session in meeting materials using other types of mechanisms. Go ahead, Courtney, please. We also encourage the creation of learning objectives. At least one is going to be is required for each scientific session to maintain the ADA CERP recognition for CE credits, and a maximum of 3 can be entered. Please go ahead, Courtney. And then finally, just a few reminders about upcoming deadlines. October 15, the closest one, that's the deadline for the organizers to submit to group or networks for sponsorship and co-sponsorship approvals. October 22nd, deadline to notify organizers, group and networks of sponsorship status. October 29, 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. That's the deadline to submit session proposal to Scholar One Abstracts platform for the ASC committee to review. And then if those are not submitted, you can see here in the asterisk, these are not going to be considered for inclusion in the program. Go ahead, Courtney, please. And then finally, the ultimate deadline is the submission of the abstracts by January 24, 2025. Again, 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. And any additional questions or comments? Courtney, anything or Brian that you guys want to add that I missed, or we're good?
I think you got it, Fernando. I will have to just try it and see how it goes. And I think feedback is going to be really important, and see how this works out. And any additional suggestions, I'm sure would be welcome as well. But it looks like a good step forward. So
yes. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your comments, Brian and Fernando. I see we have a couple of questions. I want to start with Maria. She has her hand up, and I think Dr. Fribley came back off of mute. So Maria, go ahead.
You're muted, Dr. Piancino.
Yeah, give her a second. She'll get there. I'm going to ask her to unmute. Maybe it'll pop up the button.
Can you unmute her?
There you go.
Oh,
okay, now you hear me? Okay, thank you. Excuse me. So, hello, Courtney, and hello to everybody. I have two speakers. I'm organizing a symposium, and I have two speakers who sent me the reason why the 6 references are important and their role, but they didn't write really a biosketch. So, do I have to ask them and to write a biosketch and then words for the reasons, or is it okay?
So if you submit you can do can you hear me okay? Because you keep going in and out. You can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so
yes.
So as the organizer, since you invited them to the symposium, you would know why you've invited them and why it is integral for them to be a part of the symposium. So you would include the papers, yes, as a reference, but then you can also, and you should be any paper or the CV of the bio, it should be accompanied by the organizer's reasons why this person is being included. Why do these papers make them the best choice to be included in the symposium?
Okay. But the biosketch is about their career and what they're doing, not about the reasons why. That's it?
Right. So either, because some people might not necessarily be published, or have like that list. So either 5 to 6 papers, the citations, and then your reasoning why, or here's the bio sketch about their career, what they're doing. They could be an emerging researcher that's really come across something great, but maybe doesn't have the papers yet, doesn't have all of their, they haven't been published yet or something. And then so they could be a bio sketch about the work that they're doing, and then your context about why they are a good fit.
I write. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions?
I saw that Andrew Fribley came off of mute, but I didn't know if that was on purpose.
I was just going to say thank you. I'm glad that people are talking about this and thinking about this. I've filled this role a couple of times now, but it really is helpful to sit here as a group and talk about these things. I think that, talking about elevating the science and inclusion and how to bring external speakers in from other fields, which is very expensive, are just constantly recurring themes, even in our individual scientific group. So thank you for bringing this to the attention of the GPCs and including us in this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Piancino, do you still have a question, because your hand is raised?
Oh, excuse me, I have to.
Okay. And Dr. I think Abu Tali?
Yeah, thank you very much. It just occurred to me that because I also have a session with one external speaker. So, Courtney, you have to help me here. Do they need to register as a member, or how do we navigate that? I know this is beyond the discussion here, but I just thought I should ask.
So everybody who's attending the meeting must be registered to attend the meeting. And typically the registration is based on your membership status. So if you have a non-member, and let me just backtrack a little bit. The onus for payment of registration is on the organizer. And as you're going out to the scientific groups and networks for sponsorship, you should be asking for scientific sponsorship or financial sponsorship, since there should be a demonstration of collaboration across the scientific groups and networks. Let's say you have 3 people that say, yes, we will support your submission. Then you could say, okay, well, I have this outside speaker. I really want them to be able to come. Can you cover this percentage of registration? Can you cover like these types of accommodations, et cetera? So also, and it's written into the guidelines for session proposals, but if the person that you are inviting is truly a non-member, we do extend, it has to be approved. It'll come through me. It's a little bit more of a manual process, but we do extend the member rate to true non-member symposium speakers. So then that makes it a little bit more affordable for the groups, networks, and for the organizers to get those folks to the meeting.
Great. Thank you so much. Yep.
You're welcome.
You have a comment, Brian?
Yeah, thanks. I was actually on a similar note to that, because this comes up time and time again. On top of what Courtney said, two things. First of all, almost all the scientific groups and networks have got money in the bank. You know, it's sometimes I think a little bit surprising to me to see groups and networks that can have thousands of dollars and sometimes tens of thousands of dollars in an account, and then they say, well, we can't afford to bring a speaker. You know, that's what the money is for. You know, the money that groups and networks are holding, that's what it's for. It's for the activities to generate, particularly around the annual session. And the other thing that sometimes goes unnoticed, which might be a help as well, is that even though it does say in the guidelines that speakers should only be presenting at one event or at one talk, it does also say that there are exceptions to this as well, and you can apply for an exception. So, for example, if two groups are combining to bring a speaker, maybe from a long distance, you know, they can give more than one presentation. You just have to ask permission. And Courtney, I assume that goes through you as well. But that's almost always approved, particularly if it's a non-IADR member. So, you know, it helps to maybe get more exposure and more value from that speaker as well.
Right. So for duplicate presenters, it is assessed by the annual session committee. There are exceptions that are extended if there is a identical speaker in more than one symposia that has been accepted. However, there are options to have that individual serve as a keynote address speaker for the group program, or for the group, which is a 30-minute presentation at the beginning of an oral session that could give a high-level overview about what is happening in, you know, in that scientific group network area. They could also be a lunch and learning speaker where they can sit and have an intimate conversation with people over lunch. So there are other options if you are going to have somebody come in to speak as a symposium speaker, and then you want them to maybe see a little bit more about what IADR is about, give them more exposure to our attendees. And if you have any questions about it, because it is very much like a if-then exception, please just send us an email at meetings@iadr.org. And I'm happy to help you navigate those overlapping Venn diagrams there.
Before I give the floor to Dr. Lewis here, Courtney, the process is just an email, or is there a form or something that they need to fill out to request that exception?
Well, it would be assessed at the annual session committee level as we're going through and determining and I say we, but the annual session committee, as they're going through and figuring out which things will be accepted, or if or there'll be some symposiums that will be combined if like the topics are very close together. Once we get to a certain point where we know what symposium will be accepted, we evaluate the duplicate presenters there. And then we would go back out to, typically what happens is if the annual session committee can extend an exception, let's say I am attending and presenting my research, but then also I have a particular position, like for example, the only one that comes to mind, I know this is IADR, but like let's say I am the head of NIH and I'm going to give another presentation about NIH, then maybe there's an exception that is extended there. Typically, there's not a form, or it can be put into the comment section if needed. But typically we get this feedback when we go back out to the speaker and the involved organizers to say, a duplicate speaker has been detected. Please work together to see where this person will best fit. And most of the time people are very, like, they want to collaborate. They have a backup speaker in mind. But if it's something like Brian was mentioning, then you know, there's an email, and then we will go up and I would make sure that it gets escalated to the annual session committee and the chair.
Sounds good. Dr. Lewis.
Yeah, so I have a question about the bio and the references and the justification. So that probably the best is to submit it when I am asking for endorsement by the scientific groups, but really ultimately that is required when I am submitting the final proposal for approval, right?
That is correct.
Yeah, and so that's, and then the second question, you mentioned, Courtney, the two groups that will be selected for piloting the abstract competition.
Yes.
Yeah, how would that work with, because we actually, the microbiology, immunology, we kind of talked about it a little bit. We didn't make any decisions because it may be very difficult and yeah, but how would you see it so far? I just wanted to see, maybe you already have some ideas that would help us.
Well, I'm so glad that the microbiology and immunology group is raising their hand. So I will be in contact with you about potentially being part of the pilot program. But we were hoping to maybe get a group that gets a certain number from both sides of the spectrum of the number of abstracts that are submitted. And it would be something where you were tapping, we're still working out how exactly it's going to work. And but we're hoping that the group program chairs and the officers can maybe tap volunteers that might have been like your poster session chairs to have you go around and provide questions and criteria for you to be able to spend, or for those volunteers to spend a certain amount of time with each presenter, or each presenter who's identified as a certain level of a student, and have a conversation with them. And then we are working on our scoring model and how we would do that. We're hoping that we'll be able to incorporate it into the meeting app as something that can be done. But that's somebody else's responsibility. The app is another staff person's responsibility. So we're still looking into those options, but I will be in touch. And I wrote down your name right here.
Yeah, yeah, because we also thought about a submission of abstracts. So really, whoever would like to be included in the competition, they would just have to really select the tick button that yes, they would like to be included in the competition. And then I guess there are also different levels, right? A dental students or a postdoctoral. So yeah, so
right. So I believe what's been envisioned is being able to engage all of those who, if you've submitted abstracts before, when it's asked for the student status, it is, are you a student? And if you say no, then you would not be included. But if you identify yourself as other, or any of the other student categories, that you would be kind of flagged as being able to be a part of it this time for the pilot.
Yeah, we talked about it. We didn't come with any specifics because it is a quite challenging task, but we have been discussing that.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Any other comments, questions? All right. Hearing none, I think we're done, Courtney.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everybody for attending. Again, if there are any questions between now and submission, or you just want to say hello, please send an email to meetings@iadr.org. We're open for questions about the current process, anything about submission, any commentary you might have about like what we've discussed here. And then please pass this along to the others in your scientific group and network for their potential feedback as well. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.